My wife rated her sister's friends and made me pick the hottest one, then spent months convincing me to sleep with her while she was actually having an affair with that woman's husband and planning a cabin trip where we'd all swap partners. I'm a 38-year-old man and I've been married to my wife Felicia, 36F, for 7 years. We live in Denver and both work regular office jobs. Felicia works in marketing and I'm in IT support. We used to have this routine where we'd work all week and then go out with friends on weekends. Nothing fancy, just dinner or drinks somewhere in the city. About 4 months ago, things started changing. Felicia became different. She'd ask weird questions out of nowhere and suggest things that made no sense to me. I thought maybe work was stressing her out because her company had layoffs around that time. The strange part started on a Saturday in March. We were sitting in our living room watching TV when Felicia pulled out her phone. She showed me photos of her sister's friends from some party they went to last week. Then she asked me to rate them from 1 to 10 based on looks. I told her that was weird and I didn't want to do it. She laughed and said it was just for fun, like a game couples play. She kept pushing until I agreed just to make her stop asking. There were 5 women in the photos. I barely knew any of them except for meeting them briefly at family gatherings. I gave random numbers between 6 and 8 because the whole thing made me uncomfortable. When I got to the last photo, which was of her sister's friend Rachel, 35F, Felicia insisted I give a real answer. I said 8 just to end the conversation. Felicia got excited and said she knew I thought Rachel was the prettiest one. I told her it didn't mean anything and that I was just picking numbers to finish her weird game. Felicia nodded but had this look on her face like she was planning something. I should have paid more attention to that look. Rachel and her husband Mike, 37M, have been friends with Felicia's sister for years. I'd met them maybe 10 times at birthday parties and holiday gatherings. Rachel works as a nurse and Mike does something with construction equipment. They seemed like normal people. We never hung out with them separately from family events. A week after the rating thing, Felicia asked me if I would sleep with Rachel if I had the chance. I stared at her because the question came from nowhere. We were eating breakfast and she just said it like she was asking about the weather. I reminded her that I only picked a number in her stupid game and that it didn't mean I wanted to have sex with anyone. Felicia said she wasn't accusing me of anything. She said she could tell I was attracted to Rachel and that maybe I should explore those feelings instead of hiding them. She said it would be healthier than pretending they didn't exist. I told her I wasn't attracted to Rachel and that the whole conversation was insane. But Felicia wouldn't drop it. Over the next few weeks, she'd bring up Rachel in random conversations. She'd mention how Rachel was probably attracted to me too because of how she looked at me at her sister's birthday party. I didn't remember Rachel looking at me any special way, but Felicia insisted it happened. Then Felicia suggested we should hang out with Rachel and Mike more often. She arranged a double date at a restaurant downtown. During dinner, Felicia kept making comments about how Rachel and I had similar interests. She pointed out that we both liked the same type of movies and that we both put extra cheese on our pasta. These weren't real connections, but Felicia acted like we were soulmates. Rachel seemed confused by Felicia's behavior. She'd glance at Mike whenever Felicia made these weird comments. Mike just ate his food and talked about work when anyone asked him questions. The whole dinner felt forced and strange. After that dinner, Felicia started inviting Rachel and Mike over to our house every weekend. She'd text Rachel during the week to make plans. Before this, we maybe saw them 4 times a year at family events. Suddenly they were at our house every Saturday. During these visits, Felicia would find excuses to leave me and Rachel alone. She'd go to the kitchen with Mike to get drinks and stay there for 20 minutes. Or she'd suggest that Mike help her fix something upstairs while Rachel and I waited in the living room. Rachel would sit there looking uncomfortable and we'd make small talk about work or the weather. One night in April, Felicia and I were getting ready for bed when she brought up a movie she wanted to watch with Rachel and Mike. She said it was called The Arrangement and that it was about married couples who switch partners. I asked her why she wanted to watch that with them and she said it might be fun to see how they reacted. The next weekend, we did watch that movie. It was exactly what Felicia said it was about. 2 married couples who decide to sleep with each other's spouses. The movie was uncomfortable to sit through with another couple. Mike kept checking his phone and Rachel stared at the TV without saying anything. Felicia kept looking at everyone to see their reactions. After the movie ended, nobody talked about it. Mike said they should head home and Rachel agreed quickly. They left within 10 minutes. Felicia seemed disappointed that no one wanted to discuss the movie. The following Tuesday, Felicia told me she had talked to Rachel at the gym. Felicia's sister had gotten Rachel a guest pass to Felicia's gym and they'd been working out together sometimes. Felicia said Rachel had mentioned the movie and how it made her think about trying new things in her marriage. Then Felicia said Rachel had asked about me. According to Felicia, Rachel wanted to know if I was happy in our marriage and if I ever thought about being with other women. Felicia claimed she told Rachel that I was attracted to her and that I'd mentioned wanting to sleep with her. I told Felicia that was completely untrue and that she shouldn't have said that to Rachel. Felicia insisted that Rachel was interested and that Mike was okay with it too. She said all 4 of us were adults and that we could handle a simple arrangement between friends. I asked Felicia if she wanted to sleep with Mike. She said she hadn't thought about it, but that she'd be open to the idea if it made me happy. She said the most important thing was that I got to explore my attraction to Rachel without having to sneak around or lie about it. None of this made sense to me. I wasn't attracted to Rachel and I'd never said anything to suggest that I was. The rating game was just me picking random numbers to end an uncomfortable conversation. But Felicia seemed convinced that I was hiding deep feelings for Rachel and that Rachel felt the same way. Felicia started bringing up this arrangement idea every few days. She'd mention how Rachel had smiled at me during their workout or how Mike had said something that proved he was interested in Felicia. These stories sounded made up, but I couldn't prove they were lies. Last weekend, Felicia announced that she'd booked a cabin rental for all four of us. She said it was for this coming weekend and that she'd already confirmed with Rachel and Mike. She said this would be our chance to finally try the arrangement we'd all been thinking about. I told Felicia I didn't want to do this and that I'd never agreed to any arrangement. Felicia said I could change my mind at the cabin and that nothing had to happen if I wasn't comfortable. But then she said Rachel was excited about it and that it would be mean to cancel now. I don't know what to do. Felicia has convinced herself that I want this and that everyone else wants it too. She's made plans without really asking me first. Part of me wonders if she's right and that Rachel is actually interested. But another part of me thinks this whole thing is crazy and that it's going to ruin both of our marriages. I've been married for 7 years and I've never wanted to cheat or sleep with anyone else. But Felicia keeps saying this isn't cheating because we'd all be agreeing to it. She says it's just a way for both couples to try something new together. The cabin trip is in 3 days. Felicia has already packed our bags and confirmed the reservation. She keeps talking about how much fun we're all going to have and how this will bring us closer as couples. But I'm starting to think something is wrong with this whole situation. Should I go on this trip? Should I talk to Rachel and Mike directly to see what they really think? I don't want to mess up Felicia's friendship with her sister if this goes badly. But I also don't want to do something I'll regret later. What would you do if your spouse set up something like this without really asking if you wanted it? Update 1. I need to update everyone on what happened with the cabin situation. A lot of you told me to talk to Rachel and Mike directly before the trip. I'm glad I listened to that advice because everything was much worse than I thought. The day before we were supposed to leave for the cabin, I called Mike at work. I'd gotten his number from Felicia's phone while she was in the shower. I told him I wanted to check if he was really okay with this arrangement idea. Mike was quiet for a long time. Then he asked me what arrangement I was talking about. Mike had no idea what Felicia had planned for the weekend. He thought we were just going to hang out at a cabin like normal friends. He'd never heard anything about couple swapping or an arrangement. When I explained what Felicia had told me, Mike said Rachel hadn't mentioned any of this to him. Mike said Rachel had been acting strange lately but that he'd assumed it was work stress. She'd been asking him weird questions about our marriage and whether he thought Felicia and I were happy together. She'd also asked if he'd ever thought about sleeping with Felicia. Mike had told her no and asked why she was asking such strange questions. Rachel had said she was just curious. After talking to Mike, I knew I needed to talk to Rachel too. Mike gave me her work number and I called the hospital where she works. I asked if we could meet for coffee before the cabin trip because I wanted to clear something up. Rachel agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near her hospital that afternoon. When I saw her, she looked nervous and kept checking her phone. I asked her directly if she wanted to sleep with me and if Mike was okay with it. Rachel's face went red and she stared at her coffee cup. She said Mike had been pushing her to consider it, but that she'd never wanted to. She said Mike had been telling her for weeks that I was interested in her and that Felicia was interested in him. Mike had convinced her that all four of us wanted to try swapping but that everyone was too shy to bring it up directly. According to Rachel, Mike had shown her text messages between him and Felicia where they discussed the arrangement. Rachel said Felicia had been texting Mike behind my back and behind Rachel's back. Felicia had told Mike that I couldn't stop talking about Rachel and that I'd been asking Felicia to set something up. Rachel said she'd been uncomfortable with the whole idea but that Mike kept telling her she was being uptight. He said it was just physical fun between friends and that it didn't mean anything serious. He said Felicia had told him that I was really attracted to Rachel and that it would be mean to reject me. I told Rachel that I'd never said any of those things to Felicia and that I wasn't attracted to her. I said Felicia had been lying to both Mike and her about what I wanted. Rachel started crying and said she'd known something was wrong but that Mike had made her feel stupid for questioning it. We figured out that Felicia and Mike had been coordinating this whole thing. They'd been texting each other and telling us lies about what the other couple wanted. Felicia had convinced me that Rachel and Mike were interested. Mike had convinced Rachel that Felicia and I were interested. Neither Rachel nor I had actually wanted any of this. Rachel showed me some of the text messages between Mike and Felicia on her phone. Felicia had been texting Mike for over 2 months. The messages weren't just about the arrangement. They were flirting with each other and making plans to meet up without Rachel and me knowing about it. One message from Felicia said she couldn't wait to see Mike at the cabin and that she'd been thinking about him all week. Mike had replied that he couldn't wait to finally be alone with her. Another message from Mike said Rachel would never suspect anything because she trusted both of them completely. The messages made it clear that Felicia and Mike were already having some kind of relationship. They'd been meeting at the gym when Rachel thought Felicia was working out alone. They'd been texting constantly and planning this cabin trip as a way to sleep together without it seeming like cheating. Rachel and I sat in that coffee shop reading through months of messages between our spouses. They'd been planning this manipulation for a long time. They'd used the rating game and the movie night and all those double dates to make us think the arrangement was our idea. Felicia had never cared about me sleeping with Rachel. She just wanted an excuse to sleep with Mike without feeling guilty about it. Mike had never cared about Rachel sleeping with me. He just wanted an excuse to sleep with Felicia. Rachel and I decided we needed to catch them together to have proof. We came up with a plan for the cabin weekend. We would go on the trip and pretend everything was normal. Then we'd catch Felicia and Mike doing whatever they were planning to do. The cabin was about 2 hours outside Denver in the mountains. Felicia was excited during the drive and kept talking about how fun the weekend was going to be. Mike and Rachel followed us in their car. When we got to the cabin, Felicia immediately suggested that Mike help her bring groceries in from the car while Rachel and I got settled inside. I watched through the window as Felicia and Mike took their time getting bags from the car. They were standing close to each other and talking quietly. Felicia touched Mike's arm while they talked. They looked like a couple, not like friends helping with groceries. That night, Felicia suggested we play some drinking games to relax. She'd brought card games and beer. During the games, Felicia kept making comments about how we should all be more open with each other. She said married couples needed to try new things to stay happy. Around midnight, Felicia said she was tired and wanted to go to bed. The cabin had 2 bedrooms. Felicia suggested that she and Mike take one room while Rachel and I took the other room. She said this would be a good way to start the arrangement slowly. Rachel and I looked at each other. This was the moment we'd been waiting for. We agreed to Felicia's suggestion and went to our separate rooms. But instead of staying in our room, Rachel and I waited about 20 minutes and then snuck back to the main area of the cabin. We could hear Felicia and Mike in their room talking and laughing. Then the talking stopped and we heard other noises that made it clear they were having sex. Rachel started crying quietly. I put my arm around her and we listened to my wife having sex with her husband in the next room. We'd been right about everything. Felicia and Mike were using this arrangement idea to cheat on us without feeling guilty about it. We went back to our room and stayed up all night talking about what to do next. Rachel wanted to confront them immediately. I wanted to get more evidence first. We decided to pretend everything was normal until we got home and then figure out our next steps. The next morning, Felicia and Mike acted like nothing had happened. Felicia asked if Rachel and I had enjoyed our night together. I said we'd just talked and gotten to know each other better. Felicia looked disappointed but didn't push for details. The drive home was quiet. Felicia kept asking if I was okay and if I'd had fun at the cabin. I told her I needed time to process everything. She said she understood and that these things took time to get comfortable with. Since we've been back, I've been trying to figure out what to do next. I have the text messages that Rachel showed me, but I don't know if that's enough evidence for a divorce. I haven't told Felicia that I know about her and Mike yet. I'm not sure if I should confront her or just file for divorce and let her figure out that I know. Rachel is in the same situation with Mike. She's been staying at her sister's house this week because she can't stand to be around Mike right now. She hasn't told him that she knows about the affair yet either. I keep thinking about how long Felicia must have been planning this. She manipulated me for months to make me think I wanted something I never wanted. She lied to me constantly and made me feel like I was the one being unreasonable for not wanting to sleep with someone else. The worst part is that if Rachel and I hadn't talked to each other, we probably would have gone through with it at the cabin. We would have slept together while thinking our spouses supported it, while our spouses were actually just using us to cover up their own affair. I don't know what my next move should be. Should I confront Felicia with the evidence I have? Should I just file for divorce without explaining why? Should I try to get more proof of the affair first? Any advice would be helpful. This whole situation has been much worse than I thought it was. Update 2. Things have moved fast since my last update. Rachel and I decided to confront our spouses together with the evidence we had. It didn't go the way either of us expected. We planned to meet at our house on a Saturday when we knew Felicia would be home. Rachel was going to come over and we'd show Felicia the text messages together. Then we'd call Mike and do the same thing with him. But when Rachel arrived at our house, she was crying and could barely talk. She said Mike had already figured out that she knew about the affair. Apparently, Mike had noticed that Rachel had been taking screenshots of his text messages with Felicia. He'd checked his phone and seen that she'd been going through his messages. Mike had confronted Rachel that morning and demanded to know what she was planning to do with the screenshots. Rachel had broken down and told him she knew about the affair. Mike had gotten angry and said Rachel was being dramatic about something that didn't matter. According to Rachel, Mike had told her that sleeping with Felicia was just physical and didn't mean anything emotional. He said Rachel was being stupid to get upset about it because he'd never planned to leave her for Felicia. He said the whole arrangement was supposed to make both couples happier, not cause problems. Mike had also told Rachel that Felicia and I were probably sleeping together too and that Rachel was naive to think we weren't. He said all married couples eventually got bored with each other and that what he and Felicia were doing was normal. When Rachel told him that I hadn't slept with her and that I'd never wanted to, Mike said that just proved I was a better liar than he was. He refused to believe that Felicia had manipulated both Rachel and me. Rachel said Mike had packed a bag and left their house that morning. He'd told her he needed space to think and that she was being too emotional about everything. He said he might stay with his brother for a few weeks until Rachel calmed down. After Rachel told me all this, we decided to just confront Felicia together. We didn't want to wait any longer. Felicia was in the kitchen when Rachel and I walked in. She looked surprised to see Rachel there so early in the day. I asked Felicia to sit down because we needed to talk about something serious. Felicia looked confused but sat down at the kitchen table. Rachel put her phone on the table and showed Felicia the text messages between Felicia and Mike. Felicia's face went white as she read through the messages. She kept scrolling and her hands started shaking. When she finished reading, she looked up at Rachel and me with tears in her eyes. I asked Felicia how long she'd been sleeping with Mike. Felicia said it had only been a few times and that it didn't mean anything serious. She said she'd gotten carried away with the excitement of planning the arrangement and that things had just happened naturally with Mike. Rachel asked Felicia why she'd lied to both of us about what we wanted. Felicia said she hadn't meant to manipulate anyone. She said she'd thought maybe if we all tried it together, it would be easier for everyone to accept. I asked Felicia if she'd ever actually cared about whether I slept with Rachel or not. Felicia was quiet for a long time. Then she admitted that she'd mostly been focused on Mike and that the arrangement had been a way to make sleeping with him seem okay. Felicia started crying and apologizing. She said she'd never meant for things to get so complicated. She said she'd thought we could all just try something new together and then go back to normal afterwards. But I wasn't interested in her apologies. I asked Felicia to pack some clothes and stay somewhere else for a while. I said I needed time to decide what I wanted to do about our marriage. Felicia asked if we could work things out, but I told her I wasn't ready to talk about that yet. Felicia packed a bag and left to stay with her sister. Before she left, she asked me not to tell her sister what had really happened. She said her sister would take my side and that Felicia would lose her family support. I told Felicia that what she'd done was her problem to deal with, not mine. After Felicia left, Rachel and I talked about our next steps. Rachel had already decided she wanted a divorce from Mike. She said she couldn't trust him anymore and that she didn't want to be married to someone who would manipulate her like that. I wasn't sure about divorce yet, but I knew I needed space from Felicia to figure out my feelings. The manipulation had been going on for months and I needed time to understand how much of our marriage had been real. Rachel and I also talked about whether we should tell other people what had happened. Rachel's sister already knew because Rachel had been staying there. My parents lived in another state and I hadn't decided whether to tell them yet. The hard part was that Felicia's sister was going to find out eventually. Felicia and her sister were very close and Felicia's sister was also friends with Rachel. We knew Felicia's sister would want to know why Felicia had suddenly moved in with her and why Rachel was getting divorced. Rachel decided to tell Felicia's sister the truth. She said Felicia's sister deserved to know what kind of person she was letting stay in her house. I agreed because Felicia's sister had always been kind to me and I didn't want her to think I was the one who had caused problems in the marriage. When Rachel told Felicia's sister what had happened, Felicia's sister was shocked. She said she'd noticed that Felicia had been acting different lately but that she'd never suspected an affair. Felicia's sister said she'd thought Felicia and Mike were just becoming better friends through the gym. Felicia's sister confronted Felicia that same day. According to Felicia's sister, Felicia broke down and admitted everything. Felicia said she was ashamed of what she'd done and that she knew she'd ruined her marriage. But she also said she'd been unhappy in our marriage for a long time and that meeting Mike had made her realize what she was missing. This was news to me. Felicia had never told me she was unhappy in our marriage. We'd had normal married couple problems but nothing that seemed serious. Learning that Felicia had been unhappy for a long time made me think that maybe our marriage had been over before the affair even started. Felicia's sister told Felicia she could stay for 1 week but then she needed to find somewhere else to live. Felicia's sister said she couldn't support what Felicia had done and that it wasn't fair to me to have Felicia's family take her side. Felicia ended up renting a small apartment across town. She's been texting me every few days asking if we can talk about fixing our marriage. I haven't responded to most of her texts because I'm still trying to process everything that happened. Rachel filed for divorce from Mike 2 weeks ago. Mike tried to contest it at first but Rachel had enough evidence of the affair that Mike's lawyer told him not to fight it. Mike is now living with his brother permanently and looking for a new place. The strangest part of all this is that Rachel and I have become close friends through this whole situation. We talk on the phone most days and meet for coffee or lunch a few times a week. We're both dealing with the same feelings of betrayal and manipulation, so it helps to have someone who understands exactly what we're going through. Some people have asked if Rachel and I are dating now, but we're not. We're just two people who got manipulated by our spouses and who are helping each other get through it. Neither of us is ready to think about dating anyone right now. I still haven't decided about divorce. Part of me thinks our marriage might be salvageable if Felicia is willing to do the work to rebuild trust. But another part of me thinks the manipulation was so extensive that I'll never be able to trust her again. Felicia has been asking to meet in person to talk about our future. I'm planning to agree to one conversation to see if she's genuinely sorry or if she's just sorry she got caught. Depending on how that conversation goes, I'll decide whether to try marriage counseling or just file for divorce. I'll update again after I talk to Felicia in person. Update 3. I met with Felicia 3 weeks ago to talk about our marriage. The conversation convinced me that divorce was the right choice, but not for the reasons I expected. Felicia and I met at a coffee shop near her apartment. She'd been asking for this meeting for weeks and I finally agreed because I wanted to hear what she had to say. I thought maybe she'd have some explanation that would help me understand why she'd done what she did. Felicia started by apologizing for lying to me and for manipulating me. She said she knew what she'd done was wrong and that she was willing to do whatever it took to save our marriage. She said she'd already found a therapist and that she was working on understanding why she'd made such bad choices. But then Felicia said something that changed everything for me. She said she'd been thinking a lot about our marriage and that she'd realized we'd both been unhappy for years. She said the affair with Mike had shown her what she'd been missing in our relationship. I asked Felicia what she meant by that. She said Mike had made her feel desired and excited in a way that I hadn't made her feel in a long time. She said our marriage had become routine and boring and that Mike had reminded her what passion felt like. Felicia said she didn't want to be with Mike anymore because she'd realized he was just using her for sex. But she said she also didn't want to go back to the way our marriage had been before. She said if we got back together, we'd need to completely change how we related to each other. Felicia suggested that we should consider an open marriage or some kind of arrangement where we could both see other people sometimes. She said this would prevent either of us from feeling trapped or bored in the future. She said lots of couples were doing this successfully and that it might save our marriage. I stared at Felicia while she explained her ideas about restructuring our marriage. She was talking about seeing other people and changing our relationship like she was suggesting we redecorate the living room. She didn't seem to understand that the problem wasn't that our marriage was boring. The problem was that she'd lied to me for months and manipulated me into almost sleeping with someone I didn't want to sleep with. I told Felicia that I wasn't interested in an open marriage or any kind of arrangement with other people. I said I'd been happy with our marriage the way it was and that I'd never thought it was boring or routine. I said the only thing wrong with our marriage was that she decided to have an affair instead of talking to me about whatever problems she was having. Felicia said I was being close-minded and that I wasn't willing to consider solutions that might make both of us happier. She said traditional marriage wasn't working for people anymore and that couples needed to be more flexible about their expectations. That's when I realized that Felicia hadn't really changed at all. She was still trying to manipulate me into agreeing to something I didn't want. The affair hadn't been a mistake or a moment of weakness. It had been Felicia deciding that she wanted something different and then lying to get it. I told Felicia that I wanted a divorce and that I wouldn't be changing my mind. Felicia got upset and said I wasn't even willing to try to save our marriage. She said I was giving up on 7 years together over one mistake. But it hadn't been one mistake. It had been months of lies and manipulation. Felicia had convinced me that I wanted something I didn't want. She'd made me feel guilty for not being attracted to Rachel. She'd planned an entire weekend where she could sleep with Mike while making me feel like I was the one who wanted to swap partners. Felicia and I have been separated for 2 months now and the divorce papers were filed last week. Felicia tried to ask for spousal support but my lawyer said she was unlikely to get it because of the affair. Felicia also wanted half the value of our house, but we'd bought it with money I'd inherited from my grandmother, so that's not happening either. Rachel's divorce from Mike was finalized 2 weeks ago. Mike didn't contest it once his lawyer explained how much evidence Rachel had of the affair. Rachel got to keep their house because Mike had moved out voluntarily and hadn't contributed to the mortgage in the final months of their marriage. Rachel and I are still friends but we don't talk as much as we did when everything first happened. She started dating someone new, a guy she met through work who doesn't know anything about her ex-husband or the manipulation. Rachel says it feels good to be with someone who takes her at face value instead of trying to convince her to want things she doesn't want. I'm not ready to date anyone yet. I'm still processing how extensively Felicia lied to me and how long I believed those lies. I keep thinking about all the times Felicia told me I was attracted to Rachel and how I eventually started to wonder if maybe she was right. The manipulation was so gradual that I almost convinced myself I wanted something I'd never actually wanted. Mike and Felicia are no longer in contact with each other. According to Rachel, Mike told his brother that Felicia had been clingy and demanding after their affair was exposed. Mike said Felicia had expected him to leave Rachel and be with her, which hadn't been part of his plan. Mike apparently just wanted to have sex with Felicia sometimes while staying married to Rachel. Felicia has moved to a different part of town and changed gyms. She's blocked me on social media and asks all communication to go through our lawyers. Felicia's sister told me that Felicia is angry with everyone and blames Rachel and me for not being more open-minded about the arrangement. The hardest part of this whole situation has been realizing how much of my marriage was based on Felicia's lies. I don't know if she was ever really happy with me or if she was always looking for something else. I don't know how many other times she manipulated me into thinking I wanted something I didn't want. But I also know that I'm better off without someone who would manipulate me like that. Rachel and I helped each other see that we deserved partners who would be honest with us about what they wanted instead of tricking us into agreeing to things we didn't want. The divorce should be final in another month or 2. After that, I'm planning to move to a different part of Denver and start over somewhere that doesn't remind me of Felicia and all her lies. I'm not sure what comes next, but at least I'll be making my own choices about it instead of being manipulated into choices someone else wants me to make. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My fiancée disappeared every evening claiming work stress during wedding planning, but private investigator revealed she was cheating with a gym trainer. She laughed and said I'd never find better than her. Then I met my ex's opposite and got the perfect revenge. I, 35M, need to get this off my chest because the past few months have been a complete whirlwind. Sorry for the long post, but there's a lot to unpack here. Until recently I was engaged to Kimberly, 29F. We met 2 years ago through a mutual friend at a work party. Kimberly worked in marketing for a tech startup and I'm an accountant at a mid-sized firm. Not the most exciting job, but it pays well and gives me stability. Kimberly was different from anyone I'd dated before. She had this energy that filled up any room she walked into. Always perfectly dressed, always knew what to say, always the center of attention wherever we went. I'll be honest, when we first started talking, I couldn't believe someone like her would be interested in me. I'm pretty average looking, kind of quiet, and definitely not the type who usually gets noticed at parties. But we clicked immediately. She said she liked how genuine I was compared to the guys she usually dated. We started meeting for coffee, then dinner, then spending entire weekends together. Within 3 months we were officially dating, and 6 months after that we moved in together to a nice apartment downtown. The first year was great. Kimberly was always planning fun activities for us, weekend trips, trying new restaurants, going to concerts. She had expensive taste, but I didn't mind spending money to keep up with her lifestyle. I wanted to make her happy, and seeing her excited about things made me happy too. About 18 months into our relationship, I proposed. I'd been saving for months to get her the ring I knew she wanted, a 2-carat diamond solitaire that cost more than my car. She said yes immediately and started planning our wedding right away. She wanted a big ceremony with all the bells and whistles. The venue alone was going to cost us 15 grand. That's when things started changing. Kimberly became obsessed with wedding planning, but in a way that didn't include me much. She'd spend hours on Pinterest and wedding websites, calling vendors, scheduling appointments. Whenever I tried to give input, she'd brush me off or tell me I didn't understand what made a wedding special. She also started working late more often. Her startup was supposedly going through a busy period with a big product launch. She'd text me around 7 or 8 saying she had to stay until 9 or 10 to finish projects. This went on for weeks. At first I didn't think much of it. I trusted her and I knew how demanding her job could be. But then I started noticing other changes. She'd come home and immediately jump in the shower. She'd be protective of her phone, taking it with her everywhere including the bathroom. When I'd ask about her day, her answers became vague and short. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in March. Kimberly texted me at 6:30 saying she'd be home late again. Around 9:30 I decided to surprise her by bringing dinner to her office. I'd done this before during her genuinely busy periods and she always appreciated it. When I got to her building, the parking garage was almost empty. I went up to her floor and found the office completely dark. The security guard told me most people had left by 6 that evening. There hadn't been anyone working late on that floor for weeks. I sat in my car for 20 minutes trying to figure out what was happening. Kimberly had clearly lied about where she was. I drove home and waited for her to get back. She walked in around 10:45. I asked how work went and she gave me the same story about staying late on the product launch. I asked specific questions about what she'd been working on. Her answers were scattered and didn't make much sense. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I started paying closer attention to her patterns. The late nights continued, but now I knew she wasn't actually at work. She'd changed her phone passcode recently. She was getting texts at odd hours and would angle her phone away from me when she read them. I tried talking to her about us, about the wedding, about whether everything was okay. She'd get defensive and accuse me of being paranoid or clingy. She said planning a wedding was stressful and I should be more understanding about her need for space. 2 weeks after the office incident, I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I hired a private investigator. I found a guy online who specialized in infidelity cases. His name was Dave and he'd been doing this work for 15 years. I met him at a coffee shop and explained the situation. Dave was straightforward about how it would work. He'd follow Kimberly for a week, document where she went and who she met. He'd provide photo evidence of anything relevant. His fee was $1,200 up front. I paid him and went home to wait. Those 7 days were torture. Every time Kimberly left the house, I wondered if Dave was following her. Every time she came home late, I wondered what photos he was taking. Kimberly's behavior during that week was consistent with what I'd been observing. She claimed to work late 4 times. She was distant and distracted. She spent a lot of time on her phone with the screen tilted away from me. Dave called me the following Monday. He asked me to meet him at the same coffee shop. When I got there, he had a manila envelope waiting for me on the table. He opened it and pulled out a stack of photos. The first few showed Kimberly's car parked outside a townhouse complex about 20 minutes from our apartment. Then there were photos of her walking up to one of the units. Then photos of her with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair and a gym-built physique. The worst photos were of them together on his porch. Her arms around his neck, him holding her waist, both of them kissing. Multiple photos over multiple days showing the same behavior. Dave told me she'd visited this man's place 4 times during the week he'd been following her. Each visit lasted between 2 and 4 hours. He'd done some basic research and found out the man's name was Jake Martinez. He worked as a personal trainer at a gym downtown. I stared at the photos for I don't know how long. Dave eventually asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine and paid him the remainder of his fee. I drove home with the envelope on my passenger seat. Kimberly was at work, her actual work this time, apparently. I sat in our apartment looking around at all the wedding planning materials scattered across our dining room table. Venue contracts, catering menus, flower arrangements, seating charts. When Kimberly got home that evening, I was sitting on the couch with the envelope next to me. I asked her to sit down because we needed to talk. I told her I knew about Jake Martinez. I told her about the private investigator. I pulled out the photos and laid them on the coffee table between us. Kimberly looked at the photos without saying anything. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She just sat there staring at them. Finally, I told her our engagement was over. I told her she needed to move out. That's when she started laughing. Not a nervous laugh or a guilty laugh. A genuine, amused laugh like I just told her something funny. She looked at me and said I was being dramatic. She called it a fling, said it didn't mean anything serious. She said most people have moments of weakness during stressful times like wedding planning. Then she said something that I still can't believe came out of her mouth. She asked me if I really thought I'd find someone better than her. She said I should be grateful she was willing to marry me despite our obvious differences in what she called our social levels. She actually used the phrase social levels. Like we were living in some kind of class system and I should be thankful she was lowering herself to be with me. I told her to pack her things and get out. She said I was making a huge mistake and I'd regret this decision. She said she'd give me a few days to cool off and then we could work things out like adults. I told her there was nothing to work out. I told her the engagement was over, the wedding was cancelled, and she needed to leave. She packed a bag that night and said she'd be staying with a friend. She said she'd come back in a few days to get the rest of her stuff once I came to my senses. The next morning, I started making calls. I canceled the venue, the caterer, the florist, the photographer. Most of them were understanding given the circumstances. A few had cancellation fees, but it was worth it to be done with the whole thing. I also called my mom and my sister to let them know the wedding was off. I gave them the basic details about the cheating. They were both supportive and said they'd never completely trusted Kimberly anyway, which was news to me. Kimberly texted me throughout the week asking if I was ready to talk. I didn't respond. The following Saturday she showed up at our apartment with her key. I'd already changed the locks. She rang the doorbell and I let her in to get her belongings. She kept trying to start conversations about how we could fix this. I didn't engage. I just watched her pack her things into boxes. Before she left, she told me I was throwing away the best thing that ever happened to me. She said I'd realize what I'd lost once I went back to dating women in my actual league. I haven't spoken to her since then. That was 2 months ago. I know this is long, but I needed to get it all out. I keep wondering if I made the right decision. Part of me thinks maybe I should have tried to work through it. But then I remember those photos and the way she laughed when I confronted her, and I know I did what I had to do. Has anyone else been through something like this? How do you move on from someone who made you feel like you were lucky just to be with them? Update 1. I wasn't planning to update this, but some things have happened that I thought you all might find interesting. First, thank you to everyone who commented on my original post. The responses really helped me see that I'd made the right decision. A lot of you shared similar stories and it made me realize that Kimberly's behavior was more common than I thought. About a month after my original post, I started going out more. Not dating, just hanging out with friends I'd neglected during my relationship with Kimberly. My buddy Chris had been asking me to join his recreational basketball league for years, so I finally signed up. The league plays at a community center near downtown. It's mostly guys in their 30s and 40s who want to stay active without being too serious about it. We play Tuesday and Thursday evenings. After about 3 weeks in the league, I was leaving practice when I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. Her name is Rachel and we went to college together. We weren't close friends back then, but we'd had a few classes together and always got along well. Rachel had just finished teaching a pottery class at the same community center. She's an art teacher at a local middle school and does ceramics classes on the side. We ended up talking in the parking lot for about an hour, catching up on what we'd both been doing since graduation. She mentioned she'd gotten divorced about 6 months earlier. Her ex-husband had been having an affair with a coworker. The way she talked about it was matter of fact, like she'd processed it and moved on. I told her about my situation with Kimberly. We started texting occasionally after that. Nothing romantic, just friendly conversations about our respective breakups and how we were adjusting to being single again. She had a good sense of humor about the whole thing, which I appreciated. A few weeks later, Rachel asked if I wanted to grab dinner sometime. She said it would be nice to have a meal with someone who understood what it was like to be cheated on. I agreed and we met at a casual Italian place near her apartment. The dinner went really well. Rachel was easy to talk to and we had more in common than I'd remembered from college. She'd also been engaged when her marriage fell apart, so she understood the extra sting of having wedding plans destroyed by infidelity. We started meeting for dinner regularly, maybe once a week. It was nice having a friend who got what I'd been through. Rachel never made me feel like I should be over it faster or that I should have seen it coming. About 6 weeks ago, our friendship started becoming something more. It happened gradually, longer conversations, more personal topics, spending entire weekends together. Rachel was different from Kimberly in almost every way. She was quieter, more thoughtful, less concerned with appearances. She seemed genuinely interested in who I was as a person rather than what I could provide for her. 3 weeks ago we made it official. We're taking things slowly since we're both coming out of serious relationships, but it feels right in a way that my relationship with Kimberly never did. Here's where things get interesting. Last Saturday, Rachel and I went to a street festival downtown. We were walking around looking at the vendor booths when I heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw Kimberly walking toward us. She was dressed up like she was going to a nightclub even though it was 2 PM at a community street fair. She had a guy with her who I didn't recognize, not Jake Martinez from the photos, someone else entirely. Kimberly looked at Rachel and then at me with this expression like she was trying to figure out what was happening. She introduced herself to Rachel and asked how we knew each other. Rachel was polite but brief in her responses. Then Kimberly asked to speak with me privately. Rachel said she'd wait by the food trucks and walked away. Kimberly started by asking if Rachel was my girlfriend. When I said yes, she laughed the same way she'd laughed when I confronted her about cheating. She said she couldn't believe I'd moved on so quickly, and with someone so ordinary. She asked if I was happy with my downgrade. She said Rachel seemed nice but wasn't exactly what she'd call striking. She said she was surprised I'd settled for someone so plain when I'd been engaged to her. I told Kimberly that Rachel was a better person than she'd ever be. I told her that being kind and honest mattered more than looking good at parties. Kimberly said I was just trying to make myself feel better about losing her. She said she knew I missed what we had together. She said the guy she was with was just for fun but she'd been thinking about reaching out to me. She actually suggested we could try again. She said she'd learned from her mistakes and was ready to be more committed. She said she missed our life together. I told her I wasn't interested. I told her I was happy with Rachel and had no intention of going backward. That's when Kimberly's attitude changed. She said I was making another huge mistake. She said Rachel might seem nice now but would probably cheat on me eventually since that's apparently what I attract. She said I had a pattern of choosing the wrong women, first her and now Rachel. I pointed out that she was the one who'd cheated, not me. She said that was different because she'd been honest about what happened once I found out. She said at least she'd been upfront instead of sneaking around permanently. The conversation was going nowhere so I told her I was going to rejoin Rachel. Kimberly said she hoped I knew what I was doing. She said she might not be available if I changed my mind again. I walked back to the food trucks where Rachel was waiting. She asked if everything was okay. I told her Kimberly had just wanted to catch up but it hadn't been a pleasant conversation. Rachel didn't press for details but she did say Kimberly seemed like the type of person who always needed to be the center of attention. She said she could see why that might be exciting at first but exhausting long term. We didn't talk about the Kimberly encounter much after that, but it made me realize how different my relationship with Rachel was. Rachel never tried to make me feel like I was lucky to be with her. She never made me feel like I had to earn her attention or prove my worth. The whole thing also made me realize that I dodged a bullet by ending things with Kimberly when I did. Seeing her again reminded me of how draining it had been to constantly worry about whether I was good enough for her. I'm not sure why I'm sharing all this. Maybe because the original responses were so helpful and I wanted to let people know that things do get better after something like this happens. Rachel and I are planning a weekend trip next month. Nothing fancy, just a cabin in the mountains where we can hike and relax. It's the kind of simple, low-key trip that Kimberly would have hated but that Rachel is genuinely excited about. I guess what I'm realizing is that compatibility matters more than I thought it did. Being with someone who shares your values and treats you with respect is worth more than being with someone who looks good but makes you question yourself constantly. Anyway, thanks again for all the support on the original post. It's nice to have somewhere to share these updates. Update 2. I wasn't sure if I should post another update, but something happened recently that I think ties into my original story in an interesting way. Rachel and I have been together for about 5 months now and things are going really well. We took that mountain cabin trip I mentioned in my last update and had a great time. She's met my family and I've met hers. We're talking about moving in together once her lease is up in a few months. About 3 weeks ago, we were having dinner at a restaurant near Rachel's apartment when her phone started ringing. She looked at it and said it was her ex-husband Mark calling, which was unusual since they only communicated through lawyers regarding their divorce settlement. Rachel answered the call and Mark sounded panicked. He said he needed to talk to her about something important and asked if they could meet somewhere. Rachel was hesitant but agreed to meet him for coffee the next day. She asked if I wanted to come with her for moral support. We met Mark at a coffee shop downtown. I'd never met him before but Rachel had shown me photos from when they were married. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping much and kept fidgeting with his hands while he talked. Mark told us he'd been having second thoughts about their divorce. He said he'd made a huge mistake by cheating on Rachel and wanted to try to work things out. He said the other woman had turned out to be nothing like he'd expected and their relationship had ended badly. Rachel listened without interrupting. When Mark finished talking, she told him she appreciated his honesty but wasn't interested in reconciling. She said she'd moved on and was happy with her life now. Mark looked at me and asked who I was. Rachel introduced me as her boyfriend. Mark's expression changed completely. He started asking Rachel why she was rushing into another relationship when they hadn't even been divorced for a year yet. Rachel told him her personal life wasn't his business anymore. She said they were only meeting because he'd said it was urgent, not because she wanted to discuss their failed marriage. Mark became increasingly agitated. He said Rachel was making a mistake by getting involved with someone new so quickly. He said she was just trying to make him jealous and it was working. He actually asked her if we could all sit down together and work out some kind of arrangement. Rachel stood up and said the conversation was over. She told Mark not to contact her unless it was through their lawyers about official divorce business. As we were leaving, Mark followed us to the parking lot. He kept saying Rachel was being unreasonable and that what they'd had together was worth fighting for. He said he'd changed and deserved a second chance. Rachel got in my car and I drove her home. She didn't say much during the drive, but I could tell the meeting had shaken her up. When we got to her apartment, she told me she was worried Mark might start showing up places or trying to contact her more frequently. Over the next week, Mark called Rachel several times. She didn't answer, but he left long voicemails talking about their marriage and how sorry he was for ruining things. He also started texting her frequently, sometimes multiple times per day. The texts started out apologetic but became more demanding as Rachel continued to ignore them. Mark began accusing her of being heartless for not giving him a chance to explain himself properly. He said she was being manipulated by me and couldn't see clearly while she was in a rebound relationship. Rachel showed me some of the messages. In one of them, Mark said he knew Rachel still loved him and was only staying with me to make him jealous. In another, he said he'd been doing research on me and thought Rachel deserved better than an accountant who'd been dumped by his fiancée. That last text bothered me more than I expected it to. I realized Mark had been looking me up online, probably trying to find information he could use to make me look bad to Rachel. Rachel was getting frustrated with the constant contact. She told me she was considering getting a restraining order if Mark didn't stop. She said his behavior was starting to affect her work because she was constantly worried about when the next call or text would come. 2 weeks ago, the situation escalated. Rachel was leaving school after staying late to grade papers when she found Mark waiting by her car in the parking lot. He said they needed to talk face to face since she wouldn't respond to his messages. Rachel told him to leave her alone and tried to get in her car. Mark blocked her door and said he wasn't going anywhere until she listened to what he had to say. A security guard from the school came over and asked if there was a problem. Rachel told him Mark was her ex-husband and she wanted him to leave. The security guard told Mark he needed to go or they'd call the police. Mark left, but not before telling Rachel this wasn't over. He said he wasn't giving up on their marriage just because she was confused about what she wanted. Rachel called me from her car and told me what had happened. She was shaking when she got to my apartment. We spent that evening researching how to get a restraining order. The next day, Rachel filed the paperwork. She had to document all of Mark's attempts to contact her and provide evidence of his harassment. The voicemails and text messages helped support her case. Mark was served with the restraining order 3 days later. He was required to stay at least 500 feet away from Rachel, her workplace, and her home. He was also prohibited from contacting her by phone, text, email, or social media. Rachel thought that would be the end of it, but Mark violated the order almost immediately. That same night, he called her from a different phone number. She didn't answer, but he left a voicemail saying the restraining order was ridiculous and wouldn't stop him from fighting for their marriage. Rachel reported the violation to the police. They issued a warrant for Mark's arrest. He was taken into custody 2 days later and spent a night in jail before making bail. Mark's lawyer contacted Rachel's lawyer after that. They worked out an agreement where Mark would attend counseling and have no contact with Rachel for at least 6 months in exchange for the harassment charges being reduced. Rachel agreed to the deal because she wanted the situation to be over. She didn't want to spend months dealing with court dates and legal proceedings. It's been quiet for the past week. Rachel is still jumpy sometimes and checks her phone more often than she used to, but she's starting to relax again. The whole situation made me think about my experience with Kimberly. Both Mark and Kimberly had the same attitude when their relationships ended. They couldn't believe their ex-partners were actually done with them. They both seemed to think they were so valuable that their former partners would eventually come crawling back. The difference was that Kimberly had moved on to other people while still expecting me to be available if she changed her mind. Mark became obsessed with winning Rachel back and couldn't accept that she'd found someone else. I think both reactions come from the same place though. People who cheat often have an inflated sense of their own worth. They think they're the prize in the relationship and their partners should be grateful to have them, even after being betrayed. Rachel and I have been talking about how lucky we are to have found each other after going through difficult breakups. We both know what it's like to be with someone who doesn't respect boundaries or treat their partner as an equal. Neither of us is interested in playing games or trying to make the other person jealous. We're both looking for something stable and honest after our previous relationships ended so badly. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know I'm happier now than I was during my entire relationship with Kimberly. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to something much better. Update 3. I've been getting messages asking for another update, so I figured I'd share how things have played out over the past year. Rachel and I moved in together 6 months ago when her lease expired. We found a 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood about halfway between both our jobs. Living together has been surprisingly easy, we have similar habits and rarely get on each other's nerves. The situation with Mark resolved itself after the court agreement. He completed the required counseling and has left Rachel alone completely. We heard through mutual friends that he moved to another state for a new job, which was probably for the best. About 4 months ago, something interesting happened with Kimberly. I was at the grocery store when I ran into Jake Martinez, the personal trainer she'd been cheating with. I recognized him from the photos the private investigator had taken. Jake approached me and said he'd been wanting to talk to me for months. He asked if we could grab coffee sometime because he had things he wanted to explain about what had happened with Kimberly. I was curious enough to agree. We met at a coffee shop the following week. Jake told me he'd had no idea Kimberly was engaged when they started their affair. She'd told him she had a roommate but claimed they were just friends sharing expenses. Jake said Kimberly had pursued him aggressively. She'd joined his gym and hired him as her personal trainer, then started flirting during their sessions. She'd invited him out after workouts and eventually to her apartment when I wasn't home. According to Jake, Kimberly had told him she was planning to break up with her roommate soon because the living situation had become awkward. She'd said she was looking for her own place and wanted him to help her move when she found something. Jake found out about our engagement when Kimberly's friend mentioned wedding planning during a conversation at the gym. When Jake confronted Kimberly about lying to him, she admitted we were engaged but said she was having second thoughts about getting married. She told Jake she'd gotten engaged because I'd pressured her into it, but she realized she wasn't ready to settle down. She said she was planning to break off the engagement after our wedding deposits were refunded. Jake said he felt horrible when he learned the truth. He'd been cheated on in a previous relationship and never would have gotten involved with Kimberly if he'd known she was engaged. He ended things with her immediately. Kimberly apparently didn't take the breakup well. She started showing up at his gym and causing scenes. She'd interrupt his training sessions with other clients to demand they talk privately. Jake had to ask his manager to ban her from the facility. Jake told me he'd wanted to reach out to me months earlier but hadn't known how to make contact. He said he felt responsible for helping to destroy my engagement even though he'd been lied to about the situation. I told Jake I appreciated him telling me the truth. I said I didn't hold him responsible for Kimberly's dishonesty. If anything, learning that she'd manipulated him too made me feel better about how everything had ended. Jake mentioned that Kimberly had contacted him several times after we broke up, asking if he wanted to try again now that she was single. He'd blocked her number and her social media accounts. He said she'd even shown up at his new job once, but security had escorted her out. The conversation with Jake confirmed what I'd already suspected, that Kimberly's cheating wasn't a one-time mistake but part of a pattern of manipulative behavior. She'd been lying to both of us and trying to manage the situation to her advantage. 2 months ago, Rachel and I got engaged. I proposed during a hiking trip to the same mountain area where we'd taken our first weekend getaway together. It was simple and private, just the two of us and the ring I'd bought with money I'd gotten back from canceling my previous wedding. We're planning a small ceremony next spring with just our families and close friends. Rachel wants something low-key and meaningful rather than a big production. The entire wedding will probably cost less than what I was going to spend on flowers alone for the wedding Kimberly had planned. My family loves Rachel, especially my mom and sister who never warmed up to Kimberly. They say Rachel fits into family gatherings naturally and doesn't seem to be performing for attention the way Kimberly always did. Rachel's family has welcomed me as well. Her parents went through a difficult divorce when she was in college, so they appreciate that she's found someone who treats her well after her experience with Mark. We've both learned to trust our instincts about people's character rather than being impressed by surface qualities. Rachel says she's glad her marriage to Mark ended because it taught her what she actually needs in a partner. I feel the same way about the situation with Kimberly. Being cheated on was painful, but it led me to someone who's a much better match for who I am and what I want in life. A few people have asked if I ever wonder what would have happened if I'd tried to work things out with Kimberly. The honest answer is no. Even if she'd been genuinely sorry about the cheating, her reaction when I confronted her showed me exactly who she was as a person. Someone who could laugh at their partner's pain and act like they were doing them a favor by staying isn't someone worth building a life with. I also think about how different my relationship with Rachel is compared to what I had with Kimberly. With Kimberly, I constantly felt like I was trying to prove I deserved her attention. With Rachel, I feel valued for who I am rather than what I can provide. Rachel and I talk openly about problems instead of letting resentment build up. We make decisions together instead of one person dominating the relationship. We support each other's goals instead of competing for attention or status. Neither of us takes the other person for granted because we both know what it's like to be with someone who didn't respect the relationship. We're both committed to building something lasting instead of just enjoying ourselves until something better comes along. The wedding planning has been completely different this time around. Rachel and I are making choices based on what we actually want rather than what looks impressive to other people. We're focused on starting our marriage rather than throwing an expensive party. I think that's the biggest difference between my relationship with Rachel and my relationship with Kimberly. With Kimberly, everything was about appearances and keeping up with some standard she'd set in her head. With Rachel, everything is about building a genuine partnership. I'm not sure if I'll update again after this. Rachel and I are both looking forward rather than backward at this point. But I wanted to share how things worked out because a lot of people have followed this story and offered support along the way. To anyone dealing with a similar situation, trust your instincts. If someone makes you feel like you're lucky to be with them instead of making you feel like they're lucky to be with you, that's probably not the right person. Real love doesn't require you to constantly prove your worth.